Our next session is building a better private well community through collaboration, and it's our drillers panel discussion. This is our fourth event, and it's one of the more lively and well collaboratively discussed context every time. I want to thank Dave Henrich, who's with Bergeson Caswell in Minnesota. He's basically the glue that has provided us our panel each year, and I really appreciate the work he does on that. And so today we have Dave Henrich, Robert Keys, and Clifford Fosnot. If I mispronounce that, I apologize. So Dave is a 20-year veteran of the water well industry, having experience in residential and commercial water well drilling and pump installation, water treatment, environmental drilling, sampling, and geothermal design and installation. Robert is the president and CEO of Associated Environmental Industries, which I think includes Equius Environmental and Stantec. It's located in Norman, Oklahoma. He's a member of the board of directors for the National Groundwater Association, and he's a founding board member for the Oklahoma Groundwater Association. And Clifford has more than 4 decades of operational and management experience, has developed a keen sense of adaptability in the service and construction communities as an entrepreneur who successfully expanded Doherty Pump and Drilling. And so thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. And I think Dave is going to go first. So each have about 10 or 15 minutes of presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate being here again. My name is David Henrich, as Steve said, with Bergeson Caswell Incorporated in Maple Plain, Minnesota. We're a diverse water well contractor, working in a lot of different areas inside of the water well industry. Steve had asked about me doing something interesting or something maybe that people in the field, a tale from the field that had some interesting context around it. And so we're going to talk about a well construction that we performed in St. Paul, and it's probably going to appeal more to the geologists and hydrogeologists of the group, but it's still an interesting situation where it really shows where collaboration, working together, trying to make sure that we talk through all of our problems and interesting situations that we find ourselves in, and using all of our assets can help everybody save a lot of time and energy. Basically everything we do in the well drilling industry is exploratory in nature. Even when you think you know where you're going and what you're doing, you always can find little wrinkles in every plan. My name is David. I'm the president of Bergeson Caswell, the vice president of Thermodynamics and Precision Geothermal, the 2 specialty geothermal companies working on more of the design aspects of commercial geothermal systems. I was the 2018 president of the National Groundwater Association Board of Directors, 2019 president of the Minnesota Water Well Association Board of Directors, and I spent 8 years on the MDH's Minnesota Department of Health's Advisory Council on Wells and Borings. So I've been fairly involved in my time in the industry. So today, we've been told technology is supposed to make our lives easier, right? But every once in a while, even technology, needs a little encouragement. Solely relying on machines is sometimes maybe not there's a reason humans are still in charge of the planet. Machines aren't quite there yet. In today's project, we're going to talk about a specialty, kind of a newer geothermal technology that we're developing here in the state of Minnesota. Uses wells that have draw-in and injection zones. They're all single aquifer wells. They kind of all uphold all your same basic principles of proper well construction and aquifer protection. And they have a huge potential for the market. But so just kind of talking a little bit about what it is, because when you see some of the diagrams, you might say, well, that doesn't look like a normal well. Well, it's not specifically a normal well. So this project originally had 4 8-inch steel cased wells designed to be installed in a sand and gravel aquifer. We did test borings on the site, confirmed lithology, identified where we felt the bedrock started, and designed a system that would work within the aquifer. Pretty standard stuff, 12-inch borehole, 8-inch steel cased wells. The interesting part is there's two screens in these wells because we need to be able to draw and release water to make this geothermal system work. Um, we used the SurePack beads, which was fairly interesting. It's the first time I'd actually ever installed those. But interesting thing about anybody that's ever seen those glass beads is they're more or less unbridgeable. You want to talk about a perfect filter pack for a well. I mean, we installed all of the beads, all the filter pack for this well through a very small tremie line, and really couldn't even when we had some trouble installing them, these things would never bridge up. I mean, it was pretty incredible to see how quickly you could place and how perfectly you could place that pack. The wells are another interesting feature of these wells is they are flowing artesian wells. So we're cemented full length to control the groundwater flow. And so lots of little challenges on this site. But as I said, single well, single aquifer, some of the stuff, pretty basic well construction. So the well construction begins, drilling goes really well. Casing installation, a little challenging. Trying to work with an intermediate screen, placing your bead pack and grouts to all the proper levels is a little challenging because you're trying to install and float things into the hole that you want to have good permeability in your drawn injection zones. So a little bit of challenge there, but other than that, drilling goes quite well. Move on to well development, and each zone was developing 130 plus gallons a minute. So these are really productive wells. The major finds cleaned up very quickly, and then all of a sudden, some white sand started appearing in the development water. It appeared to be what something akin to the St. Peter sandstone, which is prevalent in this area of St. Paul that we were drilling in. So the Department of Health grabs a sample, takes it to the MGS, and we request a gamma log because it was absolutely not expected based on the test borings and everything else that had been done on site to date. But it was absolutely was showing up in the development water. So order a gamma log, and the Minnesota Geologic Survey comes out, logged the well again, and the borehole that we drilled next to it, logged that. Logged just like St. Peter sandstone would look. His thumbprint was really close. The driller, who's been working with our company for 17 years now, has drilled everywhere from Montana to Ohio and everywhere in between. Is starting to try to figure out, well, the log indicated that potentially that the St. Peter sandstone could have started as early as 80 feet. So he's trying to figure out, well, how did I miss 50 feet of St. Peter sandstone, which is some of the softer sand rock you're going to find in our state for sure. And so we're asking questions like, well, how did we miss that? Where are the cuttings? How is this gamma log representative of what we found? What is going on here? And it got very complicated very quick because of the cutting pile was full of sand and gravel. And so, the difference between drilling through a formation full of rocks and sand, which this is a sample from the site, and drilling through a material like that, the drilling process, the feedback just from the machine alone is significantly different. So as we're trying to evaluate what's going on in this site, this is kind of where the collaboration train left the rail, because we had one set of information that was pointing in one direction, but then basically all the empirical evidence was pointing in another direction. So punches kind of keep on coming. We gamma logged the well again, same result, because none of this stuff made sense. We're just trying to collect data and try to figure out what's going on here. Gamma logged the next boring, same results. We get a notice of violation of the correction order over this, and so now we're really on the clock. I will say, if your state has a correction order process, when you get into, apparently we have 7 days to respond to these kind of notices. When you get into complicated situations like this, 7 days to assess some facts and decide if you need to, respond to an order, maybe a little short. So the well was ordered to be sealed by October 30th of 2020. The project was way behind, so they redesigned all the bedrock wells. These are kind of all the cascading effects when we don't work together to come to proper conclusions right from the get-go. The work basically is on hold to proceed with a whole new application process. And so, as we're looking at what's on the site, the driller knows what he drilled through. I mean, he's been doing this a long time, and the difference between drilling through beach sand and gravel and rocks is significantly different. The MGS interpretation really, it has to be an error somehow. I mean, the thumbprint is ridiculously close. The data from there, it's undeniable as you look at one log to another that it's thumbprints right. But the spoils pile on site doesn't indicate that you would have that much sand, because if you drilled 130-foot boring and 50 feet of it was competent bedrock, you'd expect that a fair portion of your spoils pile would also be the same fine sand. And the only place we were finding it were traces during the development. Our drilling process employed the use of a mud cleaning system, which minimized recirculation. So you're getting a good look at the cuttings that are coming up through the hole, and get a good look at what you're in the moment. And so we're trying to figure out. We'll come back to this once. Somehow, how does this St. Peter sandstone get tilled up and mixed with the glacial deposits, and print right on a gamma log? It was. I'm still probably not. I'm certainly. I'm not qualified to come to the conclusion on that one, because it was interesting just listening to people much smarter than me talk about it. But 3 people with doctorates and another test boring later, we drill another test boring right next to the hole, have a geologist right there the whole time, concludes there definitely is not competent bedrock, literally watch everything with like a hawk. He works with another associate to coordinate with the Minnesota Geologic Survey to review his gamma log interpretation, and see if there's, look at all the evidence on site, and got them to kind of reverse their position, because based on what we were seeing, it just didn't really add up. But drillers, by context, the driller sanity starts be getting restored, because when you miss things like this, you really question a lot about your process. But he started feeling a little bit better about his capability to identify the difference between sandstone and sand and gravel. And the MDH rescinded the correction order, which was good, because based on the evidence on site, the empirical evidence really kind of overrode what the gamma log was telling us was there, which is quite interesting, because gamma logs are really quite predictable. We use them, we go through them very regularly. I mean, they're absolutely a great technology to tell what you're in and where you are and where your bedrock and lithology breaks up. So it was a really interesting situation to go through in trying to explain, why are we seeing results in both buckets? But it takes a lot of people, as you can see through this whole process. I mean, we had everything from professors to, other geologists and hydrogeologists, the Minnesota Geologic Survey, the Department of Health, and the drilling contractor, us, trying to hash out what goes through here. But, the process made a lot of extra work for people, because we didn't collaborate and work together to try to figure out what was going on there, including redesigning the entire project with a different style of well, a much more expensive style of well, to keep things moving forward. So it was quite the experience to be a part of. But at the end of the day, as we're looking at these projects and trying to figure out what to do on these sites, it's really important that we work together, analyze all the data, make sure that everybody gets their perspectives out on the table, so that way we can come to really good conclusions. Gamma logs are invaluable, but they are only part of the data set. Never ignore the input and judgment of a good drill rig operator. I mean, these guys that can get out there, and men and women that are out there drilling and have been drilling for a long time, are picking up empirical data that we're not privy to every day. Listening to what they say and what they're experiencing is certainly part of the data set that needs to be considered when we work on on situations like this. Make sure that we're evaluating all the facts as we're moving through how to proceed on projects, and get to know your state geologists. I mean, after listening, I don't even know how to communicate with them on the level that they were talking about in this kind of scenario. They're talking about glacial recessions and how some sandstone deposits could have got washed in, trying to interpret what happened eons ago with our geology is very challenging. So it was interesting to listen to some of the conversations about what they thought maybe was going on there, because, as I said, gamma logs are fairly reliable. So what's causing this to print the way it was? And really, sometimes, every once in a while, because the nature of what we do is exploratory, you just run into weird things. And this one, and my experience, and everybody's experience in this, there's people that have 30, 40 years of experience that were involved with this project, and they found this to be one of the more intriguing situations that they've been involved with. So every once in a while, strange things just happen. So thank you, Steve.
All right. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks, Dave. Interesting. I rely on gamma logs as well for a lot of things. So it's interesting. I've never, Geology is complicated, that's for sure. Okay, so our next speaker is Robert Keys. And so, Robert, I gave your introduction a minute ago, so let's get started.
Appreciate this opportunity. I appreciate Dave Henrich reaching out to me. Dave and I've spent a few nights and few days together on the national board, and we've slayed some dragons together, to say. And I take it that there's regulators, there's professionals, maybe even drilling contractors on here. So, my message will dovetail into Dave's experience of when we go single dimensional and we don't look and bring in all the resources at our hands to solve problems, we only create problems bigger. And so, I'm calling my presentation here the Army of One, and basing it on some of my own personal experiences. Now, I've been in the drilling industry since the summer of 1977. I was 18 years old, so it's getting ready to hit 45 years. And I've drilled all across the state of the United States, a little bit out of the country even. And I've found some common problems, some common threads of this separation. And so I'm going to pick on regulators, and I'm hoping there's a whole bunch of them here. And I hope you're young. Because I want to be able to help you see in a different way what your role is and what you can do to enhance that. And so, this little army of one, I show the drilling contractor, the professional services through engineers and geologists, pump contractors, regulators, manufacturers, suppliers. And from day one, I have always seen that there was this battle that the contractor thought that they were smarter than the regulator or the engineer. And in reality, most of these projects, if you don't bring all the parts together and you collaborate in such a way that you work a plan together, you're going to have a nightmare on your hands. And so I'm going to tell a little bit of what happened here in Oklahoma and what we did to resolve it and where we're at moving forward. It's not a perfect plan. Nothing is, but it is working. And so to start with, there's a couple of thoughts that people have when it comes to regulators. It's like I said, I'm going to pick on regulators. Don't be mad at me. You'll get where I'm going here. And so, but many contractors throughout the United States look at a state regulator over groundwater like a sheriff. And so we're gonna pick on Sheriff Bill here and and he represents the regulators of the groundwater industry. But my experience has been I've never met a regulator that they issued a gun to. So maybe I just haven't done anything that needed the guns. But so we're gonna have to take Sheriff Bill's guns away. Okay, so he doesn't get any guns. He got a nice hat and got a nice little belt buckle like most sheriffs and cowboys around where I'm from does, but I've never seen one with a badge either. They may have an ID identifying who they are, and their vehicle may state what agency they are. So now we got to take Sheriff Bill's badge away. Now, in reality, there's another thought. And the people who often look at Sheriff Bill as a sheriff or the regulator as a sheriff, those are ones who most of the time they're really trying to be legal because they don't want to tangle with Sheriff Bill. But then there's this other group that we see that look at Sheriff Bill more like, say, Preacher Bill, where he doesn't have a gun. He only has the good word to say. In Preacher Bill on Sunday, he's reading and interpreting these laws that somebody else wrote and that somebody else may even interpret it, giving him his direction on. And so Preacher Bill is just trying to just like the regulator, trying to make sure that the laws are followed. But Preacher Bill, he doesn't get to offer a fine. He doesn't get I've never been to a church where I got a parking permit or a fine. It just doesn't work that way. He may have the ability to kick somebody out and say revoke their membership, but a regulator gets to issue a fine, and in most states revoke a license. In Oklahoma, we've had some problems where they didn't have much enforcement, and so people were not the violators, the people who jumped state or just plain no regard for the law would keep on drilling. We had one, the guy's dead now, but he continued to violate and not grout wells in and not follow state statute. He'd get fined, throw them up, wad them up, throw them away, and not pay the bill. And so finally, the state sent this regulator down there with the club. And so, imagine Preacher Bill down there putting the club on somebody's car because they're not following the rules. Well, he put the club on that steering wheel, and the contractor said, well, I'll be drilling by Saturday. And he was. And that just enraged a lot of people that he was being that way and so blatant, and it was a consistency. So I want to take and draw a picture of what I think most states have something similar. But in our state, we have two regulatory agencies that are the regulators over groundwater and water well drilling. And that's the Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality. They have a section when it comes into outside of the private well. The OWRB is over the domestic well side, and they're over all of the drilling. And so these two agencies, in many instances, they're the ones who wrote or created a law or rule, and they take it to the legislature, who then they vote on it. If it gets through there, it goes to the governor. Now, however, when you fall into that category, if any of you have ever been on a dairy farm, got up early and milked that old mama cow, you know how difficult it is to milk a cow on a three-legged stool that only has one leg. Well, that's the description of what happens in state when it's only stuck to one body, and meaning the regulators. And so what we ended up doing a little more than 20 years ago, we created the Oklahoma Groundwater Association, and then the governor created the Drillers Advisory Council. That's a governor's appointment. I was appointed to it from the creation of it 22 years ago. I am the chairman of that council. After that council was created, we created the Oklahoma Groundwater Association. And like earlier, I'm a founding member, and I've served in every position on the board there. I'm still active member of that board. And each one of them have their own little section where they represent the stakeholders of the groundwater industry of Oklahoma. And so what we did is we started, you can imagine getting all these people in one room, and it could be a fiasco. But we started, and we discovered that we all had one for sure that we're all on agreements with stakeholders, everybody, and that was enforcement. And then there were a couple other. We didn't try to slay the dragon at once. We took bits and little bites, but we circled everybody with these organizations, and all of a sudden that things changed. Now, I want to show you these groups independently. Not one of them could go to the legislature and formulate a plan and get it done. There's just, it will not work. If the OWRB decided they wanted to change a law, and the Groundwater Association, the Advisory Council were not on board, that meant the stakeholders weren't on board. It's just not going to happen. And so when you look at independently going and trying to change rules and regs, you're back to the old mama cow with the one leg left on that stool. But as we put this together and we went in on enforcement, and we worked as a united group, everybody worked together. We went and gathered those who went to the legislature and who walked up and down those halls, myself included, many times. When I walk into a legislator's office and I can tell them, hey, there's so many people in your district that are water well contractors or stakeholders that are supporting this, and I give them a list of names. As you walk through the legislature, if this group, however you have it set up, is all one, you're gonna be able to move through there and make things happen. And so what we did, we sure enough got changes done. Sheriff Bill or the regulator, we were able to move, and we got the Attorney General, and we got the legislature to pass the authority to the Attorney General to use whatever means. If a person continues to violate, they turn this over to Attorney General, and it becomes a criminal, to where we've empowered the regulator the way it needs to be in working on enforcement. There's, it's not perfect. We've still got ways to go. But at the end of the day, we go back to this army of one. Every one of you that's on this call or on this webcast, if you're here because you're somehow working with groundwater, whether you're a professional, whether you're a contractor, or a manufacturer, supplier, or the regulator. We have three primary goals when it comes to groundwater. It's water quality, water quantity, and groundwater protection. And if we will work, you regulators I'm talking to right now, if you will work diligently at putting together these kind of groups in collaboration, you will see changes happen. It's not going to be easy. And quite frankly, we've got this whole change in what's happening in the work environment and people. I wouldn't be surprised if more than half of the people have only been on this call or on this course have only been in the industry less than 5 years. And so I'm going to show a video clip, and then I'll close after that. If time, I'll have a show too. But I want to show this next video clip here to help get us going where I'm trying to get to.
Groundwater is essential to sustain human life on planet Earth. 44% of Americans rely on water from wells provided by the groundwater industry. Clean water increases life expectancy by over 20 years. In order to access this critical resource, we need people. Professional drilling contractors and pump installers who access and deliver groundwater for the use of drinking water, irrigation, and other industrial uses. But we are currently facing a crisis that will impact the nation's access to groundwater in a few short years. An aging workforce combined with a dramatic increase in demand for geoscience professionals has led to a projected 130,000 person shortfall by 2029. We need a realistic and effective training program to provide a fast track into the geoscience profession. NGWA University, powered by OSU, can meet this need. Together, the National Groundwater Association and Oklahoma State University created this training program to improve the safety and skills of drilling industry members. Industry professionals, university students, and entry-level workers can complete this program for career development, which can lead to certifications or university degrees. Drilling Basics Online is the first series of courses offered through NGWA University and is designed to help prepare geoscience professionals for drilling and pump installation. The course curriculum is constructed by both OSU geoscientists and experienced drilling professionals, combining cutting-edge research with real-world applications. By implementing innovative instructional design techniques, the courses are interactive and engaging, which makes the learning feel effortless. Drilling Basics Online is a virtual experience, which means participants can complete the coursework on their time and at their convenience. The online format makes this program ideal for the non-drilling days of workforce employees, as well as for those working at home or currently unemployed. This collaborative and interdisciplinary program will systematically address the critical shortage of professionals in the groundwater industry. Our nation currently faces the challenge to strengthen our groundwater infrastructure. NGWA University, powered by OSU, is prepared to meet this challenge head-on and train the next generation of groundwater professionals within the United States and beyond.
Now, let me back up with some final thoughts here. I have one more video if time permits, but what my thoughts are here. I am the chairman of the NGWA University, and we are well underway with this entire program, this drilling training program. I am so committed to it because of the value of being able to have my professional staff. I have an office in Oklahoma City, an office in Tulsa. Those are all geologists, engineers, and environmental scientists, the professional staff. My Norman office is the drilling and construction group. And I have made it a requirement that all geologists and engineers, they all are required to go online and complete the course, this drilling basics course. It will help us be able to speak the same language, but I've been amazed with the comments and the feedback from the geologists that have taken it, of what they learned that they had never knew prior to it. And so as a regulator and a professional out there, in order to build this collaboration, it will be vitally important for us to understand in a greater way, because as indicated, we are seeing the baby boomers die. My generation is dying, retiring, and moving on. And so there's a whole new world, a whole new onset of people coming into this industry. And if you will commit and be part of that, you will be able to see yourself moving in a greater level in the groundwater industry. I'd like to close with
Robert, we should probably
been around since 1948, and really from the very first day, we've been about advancing groundwater knowledge. And really what that translates to is we're about making people better.
Our sections include contractors, scientists, engineers, manufacturers, and suppliers. All of us trying to provide safe drinking water and sustainable groundwater resources for the country.
Almost 40% of the population in the United States is groundwater dependent. Agriculture is the biggest part of our economy that depends on groundwater and what our guys do for them. And it is a fabulous resource that sometimes, because it's out of sight, out of mind, it's underappreciated. And that's a big part of what we try to do, is bring awareness of the resource to the general public.
And there's a lot of knowledge within the organization and the members. The level of expertise is incredible. We're respected globally, not only just here in the United States, but around the world. We have members and partnerships.
NGWA is so important due to the fact that we're all here as a association, as a group, for the betterment of our industry, to be able to see the new features of what comes out in this industry, to be able to drive our businesses as we go home, and be united as one.
My first groundwater expo, as it was called back in 2007, our president then, Lloyd Watson, who's actually from Tennessee, said that we are better together. And it still remains the case that all of our sections have something to contribute to our association in groundwater. And by working together, we'll be able to accomplish that mission much better than we would apart.
I'd like to just say thank you for this opportunity and ask that we keep this in mind, that and we recognize we are better together. The army of one will be the most powerful thing in protecting and developing and safeguarding the groundwater of the United States if we start learning to work as one unit. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thanks for all the information. It sounds really interesting. I'm a member of NGWA. I saw the information about the university, and I just have not had a chance to follow up on it. So our third speaker today is Cliff, and yeah, let's get started so we have time.
Right? Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, cool. All right. So I know we're kind of running, sounds like we're running a little bit longer than what we anticipated. So real quick, I'm not going to go into a lot about me. As Steve introduced me, my name is Clifford. I have been in the water construction business for going on 45 years now. Our company out here in California, we deal with just about everything that has to do with water. We kind of say that if it has to do with water, we have our finger in it somewhere. We not only do well construction, design, pump repairs, pump installations, water systems. We manage and maintain about 40 small community water systems, as well as through a secondary company, we do water treatment around the world. I'm deeply involved with the WQA as a master water specialist and sit on a number of their education boards. And so I do have to say that if anybody is in the water treatment industry, we really need to look into that certification from WQA. It is extremely beneficial to you. But let's get back to building a better private well community through collaboration. What does that really mean? We take a quick look at this picture here. You got two dogs, one stick. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is a progress, and working together is a success. This presentation is kind of gonna hopefully bring together a little bit about what your last two presenters talked about, maybe in a little different light. I want to not only to Robert's comments pick on the regulators today, but I'm also going to pick on his contractors as well. So what does it really mean to collaborate? It should mean that as contractors, we treat our regulators with respect, good attitudes, and maintain our integrity. As regulators, we should treat our contractors with that same respect, have good attitudes. Is that really a thing with regulators? Yeah, attitudes are everything, both verbal and visual. My next slide, I'm going to just show you a quick little video. There's no sound to it. It just kind of illustrates the good, bad visual attitudes that we can sometimes portray when we're not really paying attention. But when we talk about collaboration, we talk about respect. How do we respect each other? We talked about attitudes and our integrity, and of course, our knowledge. So let's take a quick look here at this video. And again, there's no sound. It's just kind of a little video that illustrates how our body language, when you're doing physical interactions with contractors and regulators, can look sometimes. So how many times have we as contractors had that attitude with our inspectors? And likewise, as our regulators, how many times have we looked down our nose at our contractors? So developing relationships between regulators and contractors. How can we accomplish this? So let's look at a few ways that we can effectively accomplish this. So from our regulator side of the table here, let's involve the contractors. What if, and I know it sounds kooky, we communicated with our contractors? Is that really a thing we can do? Yeah. And if you are new to the regulator standpoint, and even if you've been around for a few years, you'll probably come to realize that by and large, most of your drilling contractors around the country are small, generally family-run businesses. There's always exceptions to those rules, right? But by and large, you're going to find most of your contractors are generally 1-2 people shops. Sometimes it's a husband, wife, sometimes it's sons and family members and so on and so forth. But the important thing is those contractors have a lot of knowledge. As a young regulator or even as a more experienced regulator, one of the best things that you can do as a regulator to start to involve your contractors, ask their opinions. Okay. You have a job, and I've done this a number of times with our regulators here, and they've done likewise. I kind of have to brag just a little bit because I do have a really, really close, good working relationship with our county health department. But you have a problem, you have a question about a well, you may know the answer, but call them up, ask their opinion on something. Doesn't mean you have to take it as gospel, but ask their opinion. See what they say. We can always learn something from somebody, right? Like with that example, use their knowledge. They may have some background knowledge that maybe you don't have. And, maybe they've got some experiences that you as a young regulator or as a more experienced regulator don't know that. I quite often get a call from my health department, and they'll ask me, we got this job that's XYZ contractors doing down South County, and they're doing this or that. What do you think about that? What's your opinion on it? And I'm more than happy to help educate them. And so they learn, and it's a two-way street, right? So again, as a regulator, make your contractors stakeholders. If you happen to have the occasion to where you're developing some regulations or you're developing some policies, procedures within your department, bring your contractors in, get buy-in from them. Get their opinions, get their feelings, above all, get their experience. Some of these contractors have been doing this like me for more years than we really care to talk about. So now, from the contractor side of the table, rules are not just rough guidelines, right? Rules, unfortunately, are there for reasons, as been described in earlier presentations here. But you have problems, you have questions about things, call up your regulator, ask them for their opinions, right? It doesn't hurt. Use their knowledge. They may have knowledges that you're not aware of somewhere down the line. They may have actually learned something that maybe you don't know. Ask them for their help on things. I do that quite a bit. I will call up my inspector and I say, hey, I'm going to submit a permit. And maybe it's the permit conditions are a little wonky. Maybe we need some setbacks. Maybe we need some variances and so on. Ask them for their help. How's the best way to do this? Okay. Same thing, get their buy-in. One of the other things that you as a contractor can do with your regulators when they come out, if they come out and do inspections on site and so on, have a humanistic conversation with them. Learn something personally about them. Maybe they have a kid playing baseball or something. Next time you talk to them, hey, how's your boy doing in baseball? Or, develop that relationship with them. They're not the enemy. If you got some unique project going on, get their buy-in. Regulators, another thing that you can do. Teamwork, work together, right? One of the things that you can do as a regulator, especially the young regulator, throw that book away, throw your suit and tie away, put your hard hat on, and go out and visit as a person, a drilling contractor. Get to know how they do their work, how they do their business. Communicate with them that, hey, I want to learn something. Don't come out with the attitude that I'm Sheriff Bill and I'm here to enforce the law. Go out with the idea that, hey, I'm here to learn something so we can work together. We got to lose that us versus them attitude. I see this attitude all the time, everywhere. It's regulators versus contractors. Let's get rid of those attitudes. Let's develop a team attitude. Work together. Because after all, we are all on the same team and we have a uniform goal. What is that uniform goal? That uniform goal or overarching goal is to protect our natural resources, right? At the end of the day, that's what we should be, what we all want. It's how do we get there? What's the best ways to do them? Work together. Develop those relationships between each other. And above all, maintain your integrity. If you as a contractor tell your regulator you're going to do something, make sure you do it. Same thing as a regulator. If you tell your contractor, hey, I should get that permit out to you here by the end of the day tomorrow, make sure you get that permit out to them. Don't just blow them off. That's one of the worst ways or best ways, I guess, that you could destroy your integrity and your respect for each other. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Clifford. Okay, so any questions for our panel today? I think, yeah, interesting. I talked about that this morning, actually, where we have a lot of issues there, and it depends on the state. It depends on how the regs are. But I think in the end, when everybody does work together, that's certainly, you're going to learn things that you didn't know before, for sure. I know, so someone had put a comment earlier. I'll throw this up, see if anyone has any questions. That in Wisconsin, they have their private water regulators go to drilling school and other trainings, which is a great idea. Because I do think that's part of the problem is, especially when you have, there's a regulator and a regulatee, there's enforcement issues and some of those things. And it makes, I had a boss when I first started who'd been in the Army, and he refused to have any personal relationships with any of our staff because he felt like that he could make more objective decisions and determinations and all those things. And I think he really missed out on how much better we all are when we feel a sense of community, when we all know we can talk to each other, all those things. And, it was a good lesson to learn early. He hired me. And so, because I certainly do not think he was right in that instance. Great man. But
good point.
Yeah.
Good point, Steve. Even though we do have a number of these training sessions and so on around the country that are established, there's no better way for some of your local regulators to learn about your local contractors than, like I said, throw away the suit and tie. No offense, Robert. And put your hard hat on and your coveralls on and go out.
I got my NGWA jacket on. It's just not showing my patch. There we go. There we go. Now I got.
There we go. All right. Yeah. Go out and meet your contractors. Go out and work with them as a interested person, as somebody that wants to learn something. You'd be surprised what you can learn from them. And for us contractors, the same thing. Work with your regulators on a more humanistic standpoint rather than a us versus them. It's amazing what you can learn sometimes.
There's a three-way circle in that I've found, and we fight it even within our businesses because I do own an engineering firm. But let me back up. I don't have a college degree. I spent my life on the back of drill rigs.
Yeah,
and built a drilling company strong enough to I start buying out environmental and engineering firms. And so, and the biggest hurdle that we've always had since I walked into the industry was the hims and the us's. So
Yep.
them and us. And it's a three-way split on there. And it's you got regulators, you got your professionals, and then you have the contractor. But that illustration I showed you guys, that's a real illustration that happened and is in place in Oklahoma. And I can tell you right now, my regulators have a problem with another contractor. I have had them call me up, and I have went and negotiated and helped the contractor to get it straight. You know, it's a two-way street all the way. I just picked on the regulators because it's fun to make them look like sheriff and then really turn them into the preacher, you know.
Right.
So what do we do? I mean, so one of the problems is, and like I said, I tried to say in my talk earlier this morning, you have good and bad in every industry.
Oh,
right. Always. And you can't, you know, so
We
it's
call
just,
we call it the 5% rule.
well,
95%
right.
of
So,
people doing it right, 5% are causing all the reason for the rules to be so tight.
well,
exactly.
and what do you do about, because, you know, if you're a regulator or a county health department, and even if you're not a regulator, but you're, you know, working with drillers or maybe doing inspections or whatever, how do you solve the problem of they're usually only dealing with the bad apples and not seeing all the other side of things? Because I think that causes part of the problem. You get defensive because you've got to protect yourself and keep your integrity as far as you've got to follow the rules, you got to do this. I think what you just mentioned, Robert, about having them contact you and you dealing with it, that's what we need, I think. Because one of my things, I've run into a few drillers in Illinois, one who didn't even file logs, which is totally against the law. And, you know, but I was working in an area and had all these people had wells drilled, and I said, who drilled your well? And they told me, and I went to him and said, I'm not a regulator. I'm not going to turn you in, but I really need the data for these wells. And so, you know, what do I do there? It'd be great to have a group of drillers that I could contact and say, hey, could you talk to this guy? I mean, in the end, what we need is to bring everybody up that isn't.
If you look on that,
how do we do that?
If you look on that PowerPoint where the Water Well Drillers Advisory Council, that was an ad hoc council. The guy who started that council is now dead. He was on the front page of Time magazine during the Murrah bombing because our water board's office got blown up across the street when that happened. Okay, and so anyway, Gary Glover created an ad hoc council, and I was a young guy. I was maybe 30, 32, 33, and he asked me to be on that. And the effectiveness of it is why the governor created it as an official appointment. And it's filled with your contractors, and your good contractors come in and they be part of that. They help discuss the law. Ours is set up based on congressional district. You can do it however you want, but I think every regulator that deals with the contractor world should create some kind of advisory council that comes in and they sit and meet and they talk about rules and regs and enforcement. And this board that I serve on they wouldn't, the state DEQ would not allow pitless adapters in minor drinking water wells. Okay. And finally we got them in and we set them down, showed them all the certifications, and that council ended up swaying them to, they go, oh, we didn't understand that. It was just a lack of knowledge. Somewhere down the road, someone wrote a law. And this is what I say to regulators. If you're faced with, you're a new regulator and you're reading along, somebody asks you the law and you say, man, I know not why it was here when I got here. You need to know why. And if it's not an appropriate, effective law, get your stakeholders together and get it changed. It's easy.
So you're talking about also, there's a couple comments here about doing outreach to get more folks in the industry. I mean, this is a problem across every industry. Yeah. I'm involved in a lot of workforce issues related to water and wastewater operators for community systems. There's going to be a huge shortage, all that. And so, you know, there's a lot of programs. I guess this university is really, I guess I just wanted to comment that, there's, I'll just put it up. So Daniel said, I never knew about well drilling water, wastewater careers in high school, but outreach would be great. And I guess this is a start, but it's the same thing in a lot of good,
I contacted one of our local high schools here 2 years ago to try to get their ROP or their work experience program on board with that. And they basically told me, oh, there's no, that's a dying industry. There's no interest in that.
Right. Well, it can't die. People still need.
Exactly. But
yeah.
Let me tell you,
Dave's got one of our community colleges here that offers on an ongoing basis classes for water and wastewater treatment in California. They struggle to get enough people in the classes.
Right. It's a Dave. Yeah, we're going to comment.
Yeah, sorry. And I do, because I think Cliff kind of nailed it on the head. Number one, there's this misconception. We've been working on this, realigning the perception of this industry and trying to think about particularly private systems as a modern resource. And everybody has this perspective that what we provide is an inferior product. That piped water is the only safe water to drink. I mean, there's all these things that stack on top of each other that make people want to or not want to be a part of this industry. So one, we need to realize the value of the resource. Number two, we need to make sure we're doing as good of a job as we can delivering that resource. And I think if you start aligning those kind of things and get those perceptions straightened out and do a little bit of outreach on top of that, you will get people that are encouraged and want to be a part of it, because what we do is, frankly, it's the most useful thing that 20% of people, 14% across the nation use every day. I mean, you can't, if not, you've got an oversized tent. You don't even really have a house without your private water system. And we need to recognize the value that's there in that.
Sure.
I was president for our local builders association here. And one of the dilemmas that we faced was in my particular county, we have over 5,000 licensed building contractors. And,
wow.
One of the concerns that came up was, how do we get new young blood into the trades? And we hashed this out back and forth and so on. It came down to this simple fact. As a child enters high school, what's the first thing that they encounter? They encounter their career path counselor, right? Their career path counselor then guides them through their high school years to some career that the counselor feels probably is best for them, which generally means something in business, high tech, so on and so forth. They very rarely ever promote our trade.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to start, is when these kids enter high school, is building up the interest at that point, getting to these counselors and getting them to recognize that, hey, you know what, this is a viable industry.
Let me tell you what's happening.
We're over time, so there's a question on the other side of this that I'd like to get to, because the workforce issue. I agree with all you've said. I've said, there's a lot that can be done and needs to be done. And it's something we all need to recognize. I want to throw up this question.
Steve, one thing that I can tell you as we talk about workforce development is really hard, but the one thing that everybody on this call, everybody on this webinar has some impact in recognizing the value of private water sources and touting some of the benefits and trying to figure out how we categorize that stuff as good. And so we can impact that part of the puzzle.
Sure. Okay, so are there any resources, guides from regulators that you think drillers would want to see or find useful? We've made things like an infographic about the steps, regs for installing a new well, and illustrated field guides, field ID guides for soil and rock types, but always feel like there's more information gaps we could try to better fill in.
All of that's provided through the NGWA and NGWA University. All of that's available. NGWA University, every regulator should take that course, and it has a full guide through there. But through NGWA, every bit of that stuff there is available through our library. You can go online. If you got a problem getting anything, reach out to staff or Dave or I. We know how to get it available for you.
Yeah, and from regulators, I think more about the best thing that regulators can do for the contracting industry is try to keep us ahead of the emerging trends. We should have, like right now, manganese is starting to become kind of a big topic in private water supplies.
Yep.
So I see manganese and I see what's happening right now, and I see it being the next arsenic, where nobody knew how to communicate it, what it was, what it affected. The levels dropped from 50 to 10 overnight, and nobody communicated why. There's a huge information gap in manganese in drinking water, and this is where regulators can fill that gap, make the contractors more knowledgeable, so we can have better resources to deliver people.
So I'm going to respectfully disagree that it happened overnight, because I think the issue here is private wells aren't regulated. And somehow, and NGWA's functions have changed over the years. They've got lobbyists and all that stuff now. They didn't a long time ago, or not as active in some of these issues, because the arsenic rule didn't change till 2005. Right. And we were aware and knew it was going to change by 2001 and start putting information out. But
the manganese thing has been in the
pipeline. Not get to the drillers, right?
And that's the problem, Steve, and that's where the breakdown was, is that drillers you have 3 water well contractors at this conference. That's only 3 out of,
well, there's actually at least 4, because Gary Hicks is here.
But we're gonna get it's a small number. And the thing is, when I say 50 to 10, the change happened overnight, and the common response from a water well contractor, well, it was 50 yesterday, it's 10 today, what really changed? You're going to be fine, right? But but we knew it was supposed to be 10 in the late 70s or early 80s. We knew that 50 wasn't the right number for it, but it took them for a long time. But instead of kind of explaining the health effects and making the contractors more knowledgeable about the topic, it kind of the regulation on it changed overnight, and the message wasn't well delivered to the industry. So the industry,
there's a term they call communication.
What we know now, and so that's what I'm saying, is that manganese, and this is happening with manganese right now. There's a lot we know. There's a lot of information we need to convey, and we need to get that information, customer relevant information to the contractors, so they can speak articulately on the matter and why the people in the home, because it is, we are the first contact or the first line of defense on this stuff. And if all of the contractors, if they know, they're going to present that better option to the consumer.
Sure. Dave, you just hit on a really good point there that I think we have kind of not emphasized enough. And I do this with my local health department. I tell them all the time, we are the first point of contact that the customer's going to call. If I don't have correct, relevant information that I can pass on to my customer, then it not only makes us look bad, but it makes you look bad, and it doesn't help the customer. So, the regulators have to get the information out in a timely, concise, and understandable manner to your contractors, your suppliers. Those, as you mentioned, Dave, those are their first line. That's your first point of contact with the customer, and sometimes the only point of contact with the customer.
And we need to have better information so we can give better answers, because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know, and so we need to make sure that that's right.
But Dave, don't you say that? Wouldn't you agree that it's the underlying problem that we've discussed all day is we don't communicate well with each other. We are all a standalone agency, but it's that little diagram that I put up, the army of one, is what we should be doing, and just constant communication in that loop. Wouldn't that solve that?
Yep, that's exactly it.
This is
a good point, Gary.
Yeah, this is our other well contractor here today. Well, there might be others, but I mean, Gary.
Wow.
Gary's
we've got the expert here. If we have Gary on.
Yeah.
And then there's always that old attitude that, well, we've done it this way for 40 years. Why should we change?
Oh no, there's certainly that. And so my point earlier today
was a problem.
This isn't just with drillers. It's, I ran across a county health department where someone had set up a in-person workshop, And I showed up to give a presentation about the private well class, and this wasn't in my state. And when we got there, the state health department had a person give a talk, and then I gave a talk, and there were about 35 well owners. And the first question they ask is, where's our county health department person? And the person who organized it just was honest and said, well, I tried talking to them several times. I contacted them. They said they weren't interested.
Right.
And so it happens. There's bad apples everywhere.
You bet.
And,
That's the 5%er again.
Yeah. And so, because I was shocked that she said that.
It goes back to Gary Hicks's statement right there below. His question, his statement he makes, it's the bad well contractors that's causing most of the problems. But then again, it's the bad regulator and it's the bad engineer that the 5% of the whole deal. But
bad apples in all the barrels.
Yeah.
The 95%.
There are, and I think our mission is to bring everybody up, and those guys probably shouldn't be in business flat out if they're not going to. Because the first thing should be about protecting the well owner, and some just want to protect their whatever. And so anyway, well, hey, thank you very much. Let's see, make sure there's nothing else here. There's several comments about Danielle said her high school only pushed Ivy League schools when she was in high school. Lindsay mentioned that there's that they've taken their community, they've taken kids out to see all the local businesses, including the trades, which is great. And then I was going to mention, so Cliff mentioned that they have classes for water and wastewater operators. So we run a website called wateroperator.org, and we support small systems, towns under 10,000 people. So there's a website out there that's called Work for Water that has all these jobs and all this stuff, and it talks about 2-year and 4-year degrees. No small community is going to hire someone with a 4-year degree, an engineering degree, to run their water system, right? The town of 500, like where I grew up. And so we put together a list of all the community colleges and entities that had operator schools. There's like 30 in California alone. All the community colleges. There's one in Illinois that's a year-long class, and it's actually hands-on. And so when we reached out to them, everything's taken care of for all the big systems. They have engineers and they have 30 staff, but it's all the little ones that don't have that. And it's the same way with the issues we have with private wells. One, we keep talking about the MCLs, like arsenic went from 50 to 10. None of that matters for a private well if they don't want to change it. And I actually have well owners in Illinois who are drinking water with arsenic over 100 or 150 ppb, and they're like, I've drank this my whole life, I'm not worried about it. And there's no dealing with those. So you can lead a horse to water.
Stupid is and stupid does, isn't that what?
Well,
right.
There's a lot of complications in all this that you all see and we all see. And I've ran into drillers who, all kinds of folks in the water industry who are patronizing and not into what we're after. So,
Steve, one last thing that I'd like to throw a plug in there. Dave Henrich was the one who really put this on the map, but it's NGWA and NGWAU has a program K through 12. It's an awesome aquifer in it.
Dave talked about that last year
in California.
My state, we just had a meeting with the U.S. Senator, and their office is going to push to have awesome aquifer in every school district in Oklahoma. And so realistically, if we're waiting till they're in high school to start talking about groundwater, it's not going to happen.
Right.
We need to be, our focus should be K through 12 groundwater. And quite frankly, the NGWAU can be available to high school students eventually is what we're wanting to look at doing, to where they can have a split career path. They can go on and be a professional, get a geology or hydrogeology degree, or just a certification. But education has to start earlier.
Gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this important.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.
Waiting on me, so.
Especially last minute, Cliff. Thank you. And it's good to talk to you folks, and thank you. And We need to repeat what's going on in Oklahoma. It sounds like, political will and some of those things are always a barrier too in other states. And so at least more we know about the issues, the better we are at dealing with them and addressing them. So thank you all for coming today and for participating. And I look forward to having opportunities to maybe see in December at NGWA. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Yep. All right. So, if you have any more comments, let me know. Feel free to put things in the chat. You can also, they're listed on the participants list. And if you go to their name and click on add, then they can accept that. And then you can get their email address and send them comments, and you can have a conversation individually in chat. So, thanks, everybody. It's always a lively discussion. Like I said, I really appreciate when we can get all those folks on, and we have all got our jobs to do. We'll see you at 1.